In 1191, a brilliant young scholar named Yusuf ibn Mas'ud stood outside the gates of the Nizamiya Madrasa in Baghdad, clutching a letter of rejection, his seventh in 2 years, watching the position. He'd sacrificed everything to pursue being given to a man half as qualified. Within 3 months, that building would be consumed by fire, and every scholar inside would perish. But Yusuf wouldn't know that yet. All he knew was that every door kept slamming shut, and he couldn't understand why Allah was abandoning him. What happened to Yusuf wasn't abandonment. It was protection operating at a level he couldn't perceive. Today, I'm going to show you the hidden mechanism behind opportunities that collapse at the last minute. Why the job offer falls through, why the partnership dissolves, why the door closes right when you're about to walk through it. This isn't about faith platitudes. Ibn Arabi documented a specific spiritual reality. Sometimes divine mercy looks like divine rejection. And the difference between the two is something you won't see until years later. To understand what saved Yusuf's life 7 times without him knowing it, we need to go back to the beginning of his pattern. It started with a teaching position in Nishapur, a prestigious role that required relocating his entire family. The contract was signed. His belongings were packed. Then, the day before departure, a messenger arrived with devastating news. The funding had collapsed. The position no longer existed. Yusuf was 26 years old, and this was the 3rd opportunity that had evaporated in his hands. What Yusuf didn't know, what he couldn't have known, was that the collapse of the Nishapur position coincided with a political purge happening in that exact city. Within weeks, every scholar at that institution would be accused of heresy and imprisoned. Some would die in custody. The ones who survived would lose everything. But Yusuf wasn't thinking about divine protection. He was thinking about failure. According to his personal letters, preserved in the Cairo Geniza archives, Yusuf began to believe he was cursed. Every opportunity followed the same pattern. Initial acceptance, growing excitement, final preparations, then sudden inexplicable collapse. A merchant partnership dissolved overnight. A court appointment was rescinded. A wealthy patron who promised funding disappeared without explanation. 7 times in 2 years. And here's what made it unbearable: his peers, men with less knowledge and fewer credentials, were thriving. But what Yusuf was experiencing has a name in Ibn Arabi's cosmology. It's called al-himaya al-khafiyya, the hidden protection. Ibn Arabi taught that Allah's mercy operates on multiple levels simultaneously. The level you can see and the level that's invisible until time reveals it. He wrote in the Futuhat al-Makkiyah, the servant cries out for what he thinks is good, not knowing that his Lord is protecting him from what he thinks is good by withholding it. This is where it gets metaphysically complex. According to Ibn Arabi, divine protection doesn't always feel like protection. Sometimes it feels like abandonment, like doors slamming in your face, like being passed over again and again. But what's happening in the unseen realm, in what Ibn Arabi called the Barzakh, the space between decree and manifestation, is that you're being steered away from destruction. The 7th rejection, the one at the Nizamiya Madrasa, was the breaking point. Yusuf's letters from this period described something darker than disappointment. He writes about standing in the street, watching the successful candidate enter the building, feeling a kind of spiritual vertigo. "I have done everything right," he wrote, "and yet I am met with nothing but closed doors. Where is the wisdom? Where is the mercy?" This is the moment where faith and logic collide. Because from Yusuf's perspective, he was being punished for doing everything Allah commanded, seeking knowledge, pursuing lawful provision, planning responsibly for his family. And yet, every single opportunity collapsed. But what he discovered next was even stranger. 3 months after that final rejection, news reached Yusuf that changed everything. The Nizamiya Madrasa had burned. Not from accident, from deliberate arson during a sectarian conflict that erupted without warning. The scholars inside, including the man who had taken Yusuf's position, had been trapped. According to historical chronicles, 12 people died, including children who lived in the attached residential quarters. And this is where historians disagree, because some sources suggest Yusuf should have been in that building. The initial acceptance letter, discovered years later, showed that he had been offered not just a teaching position, but housing in the residential wing. His family would have been with him. When Yusuf learned of the fire, his first response, according to his student Abdullah ibn Qasim, who documented, it wasn't relief. It was confusion that bordered on horror. Because if this was protection, why did it feel like torture? Why the 7 rejections? Why not just one clear no? Ibn Arabi would later provide a framework for understanding exactly what happened. He taught that divine protection often works through patterns, not single events. A door closes not once, but repeatedly, because the danger isn't single either. It's systemic. It's a path you're being pulled away from, again and again, until you finally choose a different direction. This is where Ibn Arabi's teachings become crucial. He wrote that human beings experience time linearly. We see the rejection, and later we might see what we were protected from. But in the divine reality, both exist simultaneously. The protection and the danger, the closed door and the fire behind it. What we experience as sequence, Allah sees as pattern. Ibn Arabi called this al-ilm al-azali, eternal knowledge. From this perspective, your prayer for the job and the mercy of being denied, it happened in the same moment. Not because Allah is cruel, but because he sees what you cannot, the full trajectory of that choice. And here's the mechanism. Sometimes protection requires your will to be broken, not destroyed broken open. Because as long as you're grasping at a specific door, you can't see the other doors. But what happened to Yusuf over the next year suggests something even stranger. He stopped pursuing opportunities. Not from depression, from something else. According to Ibn Qasim's account, Yusuf described experiencing what he called a strange peace. He wrote, "I have decided to simply teach in the mosque courtyard, without position or pay. If students come, they come. If provision comes, it comes." This wasn't resignation. It was what Ibn Arabi would call taslim, surrender. And within 6 months of that shift, 3 separate opportunities came to him that he hadn't pursued. A wealthy family hired him as a private tutor. A respected scholar invited him to co-author a commentary. A small teaching circle grew into what would become one of Baghdad's most influential study groups. Even Ibn Arabi, who mapped the mechanics of divine wisdom in extraordinary detail, wrote that the greatest protection is often disguised as the greatest disappointment. And this connects directly to you right now if you're experiencing the pattern. The job offer that falls through the day before you start. The relationship that ends right when you thought it was beginning. The business deal that collapses after months of work. The opportunity that was definitely happening until suddenly it wasn't. You're asking the same question Yusuf asked. Where is the wisdom? Where is the mercy? And according to Ibn Arabi's framework, the answer is devastating and beautiful at once. The mercy is the closed door. You just can't see what you're being protected from yet. Ibn Arabi taught something that sounds impossible until you live through it. Every closed door is a message. Not a punishment, a message. He described it as Isharat al-qadar, the signals of divine decree. When a door closes once, it might be circumstance. When it closes twice, pay attention. When it closes 7 times, the way it did for Yusuf, you're being steered away from danger you cannot perceive. But here's what most people miss. The protection isn't just about avoiding physical harm. Sometimes you're being protected from spiritual death, from a path that would corrode your soul, from success that would destroy you, from getting exactly what you think you want, which would become a prison. According to the historical sources, Yusuf eventually learned about all 7 rejections, not just the Nizamiya fire. The knee-shaper position that collapsed? That institution was dismantled within a year, and every scholar was accused of corruption. The merchant partnership that dissolved? His would-be partner was later arrested for fraud. The court appointment that vanished? That entire administrative structure was purged in a political coup. Every single door that closed had disaster behind it. This is where it gets truly unexplainable, because there's no way Yusuf could have known about any of this in advance. No research, no due diligence, no human wisdom could have predicted all 7 patterns. Which means something else was operating. Something that saw the future not as possibility, but as actuality. What Ibn Arabi documented about divine protection is this. It operates at the level of divine decree, which exists outside of time. When you pray for something, Allah doesn't just see that thing. He sees the entire chain of consequences that would unfold from receiving it. The spiritual states it would create, the doors it would close, the version of yourself you would become. And sometimes, the most profound mercy is the prayer that goes unanswered, the opportunity that falls through, the door that slams shut. Ibn Arabi wrote in Fushus al-Hikam, the one who is protected often doesn't know he's been saved until the danger is past. And by then, he's standing in a place he never would have reached if the door had opened. Yusuf ibn Mas'ud died in 1229, 38 years after that 7th rejection. According to the biographical dictionaries, he became one of Baghdad's most respected teachers, not through prestigious appointments, but through the small study circle that grew organically from his surrender. His students included scholars who would shape Islamic thought for generations. But here's what his final student, Abdullah ibn Qasim, recorded. Our teacher once said, "The greatest gift Allah gave me was the Nizamiya rejection. I thought it was the end of my path. It was the beginning of my protection. The opportunities Yusuf chased would have killed him. The ones he received after surrender sustained him for nearly 4 decades." What Yusuf experienced in those 7 rejections, Ibn Arabi would say, wasn't divine indifference. It was divine precision. Each door closed at the exact moment it needed to close. Each opportunity dissolved at the exact instant it would have become a trap. You're not being rejected. You're being redirected. The pattern isn't punishment. It's protection operating at a level your logic can't comprehend yet. And one day, like Yusuf standing in the street decades later, learning about the fire he escaped, you'll see that every closed door was mercy. And to this day, Ibn Arabi's teaching stands. The door you think you need might be the one Allah is protecting you from. The question isn't why it closed. The question is, what is the closed door saving you from? The answer exists in a realm you won't see until time reveals it.